Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Chaf, Daf 120, second to last Daf of Masechet Pesachim. L'maisa, today was a big day for me personally. I left my house. I went to Fairlawn. That's where our friend Lauren is from Fairlawn. I have a friend who opened a pizza geschäft over there. I picked up some pizza. It was very good. Yeah, but alright, I guess that's enough for a while. But anyways, pizza, I asked him if he was going to if he's open on Pesach, if they could have matzah pizza, but he said no. Alright, okay, alright, very good. So a lot of stuff we talk about on Daf Kuf Chaf. Which is very interesting. We always hear about Pesach afikoman, but l'maisa, Bizman hazeh, there's no korban pesach. What we do is instead we eat the matzah for the afikoman, which is it's if we can't have the korban pesach, well, at least let's eat the matzah that would customarily be eaten with the korban pesach. So we eat the matzah, you would eat the matzah sumorim yochlu. You eat the korban pesach with matzah with maror. It's interesting. We don't actually eat the maror also. That's actually interesting. But anyway, so while we don't have the korban pesach to eat at the end of the meal, we still do eat our afikoman, which is matzah. So the concept of maftir and achar matzah afikoman. We have machlokas between Rava and Rav Acha bar Yaakov regarding matzah and maror bizman hazeh, the oraisa, the rabbanon. Okay, what did I write here? Right. We get up to the second to last Mishnah of Masechet Pesachim, which discusses if you fall asleep while eating your afikoman. You know, on the one hand, it sounds theoretical, but on the other hand, on second thought, it's really not very theoretical at all. People fall asleep at the end of the Seder. And then we get to the famous machlokas. I don't know if it's famous per se, but we already saw this machlokas on Daf Tes of Masechet Brachos. I remember, I think it was in Erev Shabbos that we learned Daf Tes of Masechet Brachos. I just got into the apartment I was staying at in, I think I was in Chengdu, back before Corona, when traveling was allowed. Anyways, the machlokas between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva regarding when you can eat korban pesach until. Anyways, with that introduction, let's begin. So we're going to start on Daf Kuf Yud Tes Amud Beis 2, 4, 6 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel in maftir nachar matza afikoman. There you go. So it says Rav Yudah in the name of Shmuel that, as I kind of already mentioned in the introduction, so bizman hazeh, of course, the afikoman is at Yachatz, earlier in the Seder, we take the middle matzah, we break it in half, and we hide away, I think the bigger half, we hide away for the afikoman, I think. And then at the end, we take it out and we eat it, and that is basically, bizman beis hamikdash, they would eat the korban pesach at the end of the meal. So we don't have the korban pesach anymore, but we eat the matzah that traditionally would be eaten together with the korban pesach. We eat the matzah from the afikoman at the end of the meal. And says Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel that just like after the korban pesach, we learned that you wouldn't eat anything after the korban pesach, so that the flavor of the korban pesach will be lingering in your mouth. So nowadays there is no korban pesach, but we have this concept of maftir and achar matzah afikoman, that after you eat our version of the afikoman, after you eat the matzah, so then you won't eat anything else for the rest of the evening. So again, Amar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel maftir achar matzah afikoman. So we don't eat anything after the matzah at the end of the Seder. Tnan in maftir achar pesach afikoman. So the Gemara asks the kasha, 1 second. How could Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel say that? After all, what does our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah doesn't say anything about maftir achar matzah afikoman. Our Mishnah says maftir achar pesach afikoman. Achar pesach udlo, aval achar matzah maftir. So we don't eat anything after the korban pesach, but nowadays there's no korban pesach. All we can eat is matzah. You can eat after that. Who cares? So the Gemara answers no. Lomi boya. What? Oh, sorry, I skipped a little bit. Lomi boya kamar. Right. So our Mishnah, which says maftir achar pesach afikoman, it's a lomi baya. It's not only this, but even that. What do you mean? Lomi baya achar matzah to lo nofesh taimayu. that certainly when it comes to matzah, like Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel is saying, certainly when it comes to matzah, it goes without saying that you're not going to eat after the matzah because, right, what does it say? Delo nafish taimayu, because matzah isn't very flavorful. And because matzah isn't very flavorful, so we want to go to certain lengths to preserve whatever flavor there is from the matzah in our mouths. And therefore don't eat anything else because, the second you eat something else, you're no longer going to have the flavor of the matzah anymore. Aval, lachar pesach denofish taime. But I might think that after eating the korban pesach, which is very flavorful, v'lo matzia avure, and you're not going to easily be able to remove the flavor of the korban pesach from your mouth. So leislanba, I might think that I would be able to eat after the korban pesach, kamash malon. Therefore, our Mishnah needs to teach us that even after the korban pesach, we don't eat anything. Even though the korban pesach is very flavorful, and even if I eat other things, I'll still have the flavor of the korban pesach. Nonetheless, don't eat anything after the korban pesach. And it goes without saying that after matzah, which is not particularly flavorful, you don't want to interfere with that taste, and therefore you would not eat anything after the matzah. Name misayele. Let's say that the following supports Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, sufganim v'aduvshanim v'hiskritin, different kinds of wafers, fried doughs, donuts, different kinds of these doughs. Okay, so a person can eat as much of them as he wants during the Seder, during the meal. But make sure that you eat a kazayis of matzah at the end, and the Gemara wants to argue, meaning Davka, make sure to eat matzah at the end. Eat whatever donuts, eat whatever you want. But at the end, make sure to eat some matzah. How come? So we want to argue because you want to make sure that the last thing you eat is matzah. That after you eat matzah, don't eat anything else, right? As long as the last thing you eat is matzah, then it's fine. So we want to argue that matzah davka needs to be the last thing that you eat, like Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Lo mibaya ka'amar. So again, we're saying this is another kind of lo mibaya. Lo mibaya but rishona deka'achil te'avon. So it's a lo mibaya. Kilu, certainly when it comes to the matzah that you eat earlier in the meal, that you're eating it because you're hungry. As we discussed, what was it? It was already at the very beginning of Arvei Pesachim, right? About not eating, so you'll eat matzah te'avon. So certainly you can eat matzah then. But I might think that at the end of the Seder, if I eat more matzah, maybe it can be considered achila gasa. So I might think that you don't eat matzah at the end. Kamash malan. Therefore, it comes to teach us that no, you even eat matzah at the end of the Seder also, and don't worry about achilas gasa. But it doesn't davka mean that you're not allowed to eat anything else after the matzah. Maybe you can eat things after the matzah. All it's saying is that, you can eat whatever you want during the meal. Just make sure that at the end of the meal you eat matzah. But it doesn't davka have to be the last thing and you can't eat anything after that. Just, don't say it's achila gasa and skip it. No, eat it. And make sure you eat matzah at the end as well. Okay, fine. So it's not necessarily a proof for Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Marzutra masni hachi. So Marzutra actually teaches the teaching of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel in the following way. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, maftirin achar pesach afikoman. That taka, davka, you can eat after the afikoman, right? So nowadays, at the end of the Seder, we eat afikoman. So says this version, after that you can eat whatever you want. As long as there's no chametz in it, obviously. So let's say that the following supports Marzutra, that you are allowed to eat after the afikoman, the matzah afikoman. Ein maftir nachar pesach afikoman. No, it's basically the same proofs that we just tried to bring, right? For Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, we brought one question and one proof. So now we're going to do the same thing for Marzutra, who says Rav Yosef says the name of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, but just because it's the opposite opinion, the proof becomes the question, and the question becomes the proof. Let's just go weiter, and I think you'll get it. So, name Masayele. So let's say that this supports Marzutra's version. In maftir nachar pesach afikoman, that after the korban pesach, you don't eat anything. Achar pesach I keep losing my place. Say ein maftirin achar Pesach afikoman, achar Pesach dilo. Aval achar matzah maftirin. So, let's say it's a proof from Zutra's version that the Mishnah says that after the Korban Pesach, you don't eat anything else. But you're allowed to eat whatever you want after the matzah that comes out at the end of the meal. When there's no Korban Pesach and we're just eating matzah, you would be allowed to eat after that. To which the Gemara says, Lo mibaya kamer. No, it's really just a lo mibaya. Not only this, even that. Right? Lo mibaya achar matzah lo nafish taime. Right? Obviously, certainly, it goes without saying that when it comes to matzah, which is not particularly flavorful, certainly I would be unable to eat after the matzah. Aval achar Pesach emalo. But I might think that after the Korban Pesach, which is particularly flavorful, I would be allowed to eat after it. Kamash Malan. Therefore, we have the Mishnah to teach us that even after the Korban Pesach, we don't eat, even though it's flavorful. Okay, so it's not necessarily a proof to say that you would be able to eat after the matzah, because I can say it's a lo mibaya. That certainly after the matzah you won't eat, but even after the Korban Pesach you don't eat. Meisvei. Okay, and then we're going to ask a kasha, same thing that we brought earlier as a proof, or as an attempted proof. We're now going to bring it as an attempted kasha. So we said that these different kinds of wafers and donuts, a person can fill himself up with them during the meal, obviously as long as they're not chametz. As long as at the end he eats a kazayis of matzah. So let's argue b'achrona in b'rishona lo, that davka eat the matzah at the end and not at the beginning, because we have to make sure that you don't eat anything after the matzah. So it's taka akasha on Marzutra's version, which is that you taka are allowed to eat after the matzah, yet we seem to but we have this brisa which says that you have to eat matzah at the end after all your donuts and stuff, because you don't want to be eating anything after the matzah. Lo mibaya ka'amar. So the Gemara says the same thing like we said earlier. It's a lo mibaya. Lo mibaya barishona tekachel te'avon. No, all it's saying is that, certainly of course you can eat matzah earlier in the meal because you have an appetite for it. But I might think that at the end of the meal, where if you eat the matzah, it might be achilas gasa, maybe you shouldn't eat the matzah after all those wafers and things. Kamashmalan, that even after that, you davka do eat the, you do eat matzah, but it's not necessarily a proof that you don't eat anything else after that. Lav davka. It's just saying that, don't worry about achilas gasa, you could still eat matzah at the end. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the final thing that you eat. Okay, so we saw two different versions about eating after the matzah at the end. I think lemaisa, nowadays, I think we try not to eat after the afikoman at the end of the seder. You don't eat anything else until you go to sleep. Fine. Omar Rava, says Rava, matzah b'zman hazeh de'oraisa umara de'rabanan. So says Rava that nowadays matzah is de'oraisa, maror is de'rabanan. Very interesting. Umay shna maror. Now the Gemara says, okay, one second. Now what exactly is the difference between matzah and maror? How come matzah is the oraisa, maror is the rabbanan? So let's focus on maror. How come maror would be midrabanan? Dichsiv hamatzah sumrorim yochlu bizman deika pesach yishmaru bizman deleka pesach leka maror. Is it because the pasuk says hamatzah sumrorim yochlu? You'll eat the korban pesach with matzah and maror, and therefore regarding the maror, we'll say, okay, so when there's a korban pesach, so then there's this hamatzah sumrorim yochlu. You'll eat it with maror. That's midoraisa. But if there's no korban pesach, so then the maror is no longer doraisa. But if that's the case, matzah nam yaksiv matzah smorim yochlu. But in that same pasuk where we're talking about maror, and we're trying to make the argument that if there's no korban pesach, there's no maror, it also says matzah. So why don't we make the same argument by matzah, that if there's no korban pesach, there's no matzah either. It's not midoraisa either. So the Gemara answers, matzah mehadar hadar beikra be'erev tochlu matzahs. The Gemara answers, yeah, but the pasuk goes back and reiterates a second time the commandment of matzah when it says be'erev tochlu matzahs, that at night you will eat matzahs, to teach that yes, even though there's no korban pesach nowadays, nonetheless matzah remains deoraisa. Be'erev tochlu matzahs, eat matzahs at night, midoraisa. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Amar echad zeh v'echad zeh derabanan. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov says that matzah and maror b'zman hazeh are both derabanan. Eloksiv be'erev tochlu matzahs. But one second, what about Rava's pasuk? What about the pasuk of be'erev tochlu matzahs? Doesn't that teach that matzah b'zman hazeh is deoraisa? Hahi ibayle l'tami v'shari b'derech choka. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, that the pasuk of be'erev tochlu matzahs, that's not teaching that matzah b'zman hazeh is deoraisa. No, that's teaching that by the halachis of somebody who brings Pesach Sheni, right? If he was tamei or if he was far away, so he'll bring Pesach Sheni. But what about on the 15th of Nisan, at the Seder night? Does he still eat matzahs? Certainly. Even though he's not going to bring the Korban Pesach now, even though he's going to bring Pesach Sheni, he would still have a chiyuv to eat matzahs on Seder night because of Be'erev Tochlu Matzahs. That's what we learn out from that pasuk. The Sagadate Chamina, because I may have thought to say, given the Pesach lo achli matzo maror nami lo nechol, because I might have the Havmina to say that, well, just like they're not going to eat Korban Pesach, they're going to bring a Pesach Sheni, so then maybe they also wouldn't eat matzah and maror. Maybe they also wouldn't eat matzah. They wouldn't eat matzah and maror. Komash malon. Therefore, the pasuk says, "Be'erev tochlu matzahs," that even though they're not bringing the Korban Pesach, they'll nonetheless eat matzah and maror. Fine. V'Rava amalach. Rava is going to say to you, Tamei v'shahaya b'derech rechoka lo tzarich kra. Rava is going to say, no, I don't need a pasuk to teach me that somebody who is tamei or b'derech rechoka and therefore is not going to bring a Korban Pesach now, he nonetheless eats matzah and maror. D'logari me arul v'nechar. Because why should somebody who's tamei or far away be any different than somebody who doesn't have a bris milah or somebody who's a ben nechar, that he's a snakru ma'aser lav shebashamayim, that he's a nudnik. So they don't bring the Korban Pesach and yet they still eat matzah maror. Titanis, we learn in the Brisa, kol arol lo yochabo. Anybody without a bris milah doesn't eat the Korban Pesach. Bo inu ochel, he doesn't eat the Korban Pesach, aval ochel b'matzah maror, but eats matzah maror. So therefore, just like an arol and a ben nechar eat matzah and maror, even though they don't participate in the Korban Pesach, so then I have no reason to assume that it should be any different for somebody who is tamei v'derech rechoka, people who are not going to bring a Korban Pesach. They should still eat matzah and maror. So I don't need the pasuk of be'erev tochlu matzahs to teach that tamei v'derech rechoka eat matzah even though they don't bring the Korban Pesach. And therefore, what do we learn from be'erev tochlu matzahs? That matzah b'zman hazeh is d'oraisa. V'idach, whereas Rav Acha bar Yaakov responds, ksiv b'hayu ksiv b'hayu tzriche. That, it says by Arul and Ben Nechar that they need to, that they nonetheless eat matzah even though they don't participate in the Korban Pesach. And we also need to teach it by tamei v'derech rechoka. They wouldn't necessarily be able to learn out from one from the other. Okay, fine. Therefore, I need be'erev tochlu matzahs to teach that by tamei v'derech rechoka they taka eat Pesach on Seder night. They have to eat matzah on Seder night, even though they don't participate in the Korban Pesach, because I may have had to say that even though in Arel and in Ben Nechar don't bring the Korban Pesach, but they do eat matzah, I might think that, but somebody who's tamei v'derech rechoka, since they're going to bring the Korban Pesach a month later, let them eat matzah and maror then. So Kamash Malon, that even though they're not bringing the Korban Pesach now, they still eat matzah and maror, and that's learned out from Be'erev Tochlu Matzahs, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, whereas Rava says, no, we learned it out from Arel and Ben Nechar. Be'erev Tochlu Matzahs teaches us that matzah b'zman hazeh is midoraisa. Tani Kawase de Rava, we have a brisa supporting Rava. Sheshis yom tochel matzos v'yom hashvi atzeres Hashem lokecha. Okay, the pasuk says we'll eat matzah for 6 days, and on the 7th day, it's a yom tiv for Hashem, essentially. Mashvi rishus av sheshes yom rishus. Now we want to say, well, the eating matzah on the last day of Pesach is optional. It's rishus. It's volitional. And we want to say that, well, we had a different pasuk that said, Shivas Yom Tochel Matzos, that for 7 days you eat matzah, which means that's what it means, that you eat matzah for 7 days. So how come then we have this other pasuk which says, Sheishas Yomim Tochel Matzos, that for 6 days you eat matzahs, then in the 7th day, it's rishus. So we say mashvi rishus af sheishis yom rishus, that just like day 7 is optional, also the first 6 days are optional. My time, how come? How come the first 6 days would be optional? Well, because this 7th day was something that was included in the initial Shivas Yom Tochel Matzos, right? We already had a pasuk that says that for 7 days you eat matzahs. But then we have the 7th day, which was taken out from the original klal, which said for 7 days you eat matzahs. V'yotzim min haklal l'lamed, and then we say v'yom hashvi atzeres Hashem Elokecha, that the 7th day, we say it means a Yom Tiv, but also we want to learn out from there that it's taka, you don't have to necessarily eat matzah on that day, it's a rishus. So lo l'lamed el atzmo yotza, so it's not only to teach about itself, el l'lamed el klal kulu yotza. It came out from the rest of the general rule to teach about the entire group. Yachol aflayla rishon rishus. So 1 second, period. Right. So meaning, so we had a pasuk that says shivas yom tochel matzos, right? That for 7 days you eat matzah. Okay, fine. So I would assume that means that right, that we have an obligation to eat matzah for 7 days. But then we have this other pasuk that says vayom hashvi atzeres Hashem Elokecha, that day 7 specifically is atzeres, that you stop. It's a day of Yom Tiv essentially for Hashem. But we want to learn out from there that you don't have a chiyuv to eat matzah on that day. It's optional. And then there's a concept, right? One of the 13 ways to expound the Torah is called davar shehaya b'chlal. If you have something that was included, in this case, that's day 7, was included in the Shivas Yom Tochel Matzos, in the 7 days you eat matzahs. Then you have this day 7, which was taken out of the klal, right? So called davar shehaya b'chlal, v'yatzam min haklal lamed, and it was taken out of the general rule to teach something. Lo lamed al atzmo yatza. It's not just coming to teach about itself, i.e., in this case, it's not just saying that day 7 is optional, but el lamed al klal kulo yatza. It came out to teach about the entire group, in this case the entire 7 days, to say that it's not only day 7 that's optional, but actually all 7 days the obligation to eat matzah is only optional. Yachol aflayla rishon rishus. Is it possible then that even the first night is optional? Right? We said day 7 is optional, and then we want to say that all the days are optional. So is it possible even the first day is optional? So Talmud Omer al matzah sumarim yochlu. Therefore, the pasuk says that you'll eat the korban pesach with matzah and maror, and therefore, when you eat the korban pesach, you also eat matzah and maror, and that's all midoraisa. But in the elab bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim. But that only works when the Beis Hamikdash is around. Then you eat the korban pesach. What about nowadays? Bizman she'ein Beis Hamikdash kayim minayin. How do I know that even nowadays, when there's no Beis Hamikdash, still matzah on the first night is midoraisa? Talmud Omer be'erev tochlu matzah sakasav kva uchova. Therefore, the pasuk says that at night you eat matzahs, kilu, on the first night of Pesach you eat matzahs, and that's midoraisa. Even bizman hazeh, even when there is no korban Pesach, and therefore it's a support for Rava, who says that matzah bizman hazeh is midoraisa. Woo! Okay. But everyone seems to assume that maror is midorabanan. Alright, we got a new Mishnah here. Yashnu miktasan yochlu kulan lo yochlu. So if you have your group, and at the end of the group, and at the end of the Seder, they're eating matzah, right? So it's bizman hazeh, there's no korban Pesach anymore, and it's the end of the Seder, everyone's eating their afikoman, and it's matzah, obviously. So if some of them fell asleep, so it's okay, the rest of the people can continue eating. But if all of them fell asleep, so then nobody can continue. Right? When they wake up, they can't continue eating because it'll be like, they had hesach hadas, and they took their mind off of the matzah, and they can't continue eating it. Fine. It'll be like they're eating in two different places. Rabbi Yossi almost says, Rabbi Yossi nisnam nemu, yochlu nirtmu lo yochlu. So Rabbi Yossi says in the Reisha, in the first part of the Mishnah, when it says that if some of them fell asleep, so then they can continue eating their korban, their afikoman. That is only if they kind of like dozed off a little bit. But if they mamish fell asleep, so then they wouldn't be able to eat their korban pesach when they continue eating afikoman when they wake up. Ha-pesach achuchatzos metamis hayodayim. The korban pesach after midnight makes your hands tameh. If you touch them, if you touch the korban pesach after midnight, it becomes noser at midnight, and then your hands, right, noser is metamis hayodayim, as we learned probably like a month or two ago already at this point. Ha-pigol va'noser metamis hayodayim, and we say that pigol, if you slaughter an animal or do I think any of the 4 avodos of shchita, kabbalah, halacha, zrika, with intention to eat the korban pesach outside of its I guess really any animal, any korban outside of its when you're supposed to eat it. So then vanosar, or leftover korbanos, after you're no longer allowed to eat it, metaminus hayadayin, make your hands tameh. Rabbi Yossi says the Gemara, nisnam nemu. So you're going to see, I'm going to struggle with these words. They're very, it's hard to pronounce. So it says Rabbi Yossi, nisnam nemu, yochlu, nirdemu, lo yochlu. So it says Rabbi Yossi, as we saw in our Mishnah, that dafka, when we say that if some of the group falls asleep, so I think it means when they wake up, they can continue eating. So that's only if they kind of dozed off. But if they mamish fell asleep, so then they wouldn't be able to continue eating when they woke up. What exactly does it mean to doze off? Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, nim velo nim, tir velo tir. Okay, it means he's kind of like, nodding in and out. If you call out his name, he'll say, like very drearily and tiredly, he'll respond. But he wouldn't be able to like think logically. And as the Rashbam says, Kilu, if you said, hey, do you remember where you left such and such an item? No chance. He would not remember. But if you say, oh, do you remember leaving such and such a thing in such and such a place? He would say, oh yeah, I remember that. So he's kind of like in and out, nodding in and out. But if it's more than that, then it would be considered sleeping, and that would be too much, and he would not be able to continue eating the matzah after that. Abai was sitting before Rabbah, and he noticed that Rabbah was dozing off while he was eating his matzah at the end of the Seder. So Abai says to Rabbah, Menim konoim mar, are you dozing off? Minume ka minamnamna. He says, yeah, I'm like dozing off. Utnan, and we learn in the Mishnah, nisnam nemu, yochlu nirdim lo yochlu. And we learn in our Mishnah that that's okay, because dozing off is okay, as long as you don't mamish fall asleep. Okay, fine. So we're saying that the korban pesach after midnight, so it makes your hands tameh. So what do we see? So we see that after midnight, the korban pesach becomes noser. Man Tana. So who is the Tana who holds this? Who holds that after chatzos, the korban pesach becomes noser? Leftover, you can no longer eat it. Rav Yosef, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, says Rav Yosef, that is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The Tana is we learn in the Brayso that they will eat the meat on this night. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Nemer Kam Balayla Hazeh. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, well, it says by Korban Pesach Balayla Hazeh, V'Nemer Loholon, and it says by Makas Bechoris V'Avati Be'eretz Mitzrayim Balayla Hazeh, and I will pass through Egypt Balayla Hazeh. So it says Balayla Hazeh, on this night, by Korban Pesach and by Makas Bechoris. Ma'loholon al Chatzos, Avkan al Chatzos, just like Makas Bechoris was at Chatzos, was at midnight, so also the Korban Pesach you can only eat until midnight. After that it becomes noser. Amalur Rabbi Kiva says to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, V'alo nemer chipazon. But one second, it says that you eat the Korban Pesach b'chipazon. Ad shas chipazon, i.e., you can eat, argues Rabbi Akiva, the Korban Pesach until the shas chipazon, until the time that they were in a haste, i.e., till the morning. That in the morning is when they, got moving to leave Egypt. Imke matamlom balayla, but Rabbi Akiva, if you can eat the Korban Pesach during until the morning, so why does it say balayla? Right? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah learns from balayla azeh that it dafka until chatzos. What does Rabbi Akiva do with balayla if he learns that you can eat the Korban Pesach until the morning? Well, is it possible that you can eat the Korban Pesach in the afternoon, kilu, on Erev Pesach. So let's take a step back. If you bring, let's say, a Korban Toda. So Korban Toda, for example, you eat for the day that you slaughter it and the following night. So kilu, if you would offer it in the afternoon, you'd be able to eat it in the afternoon plus the night that's following. So I might have the Havmina to say that the same thing applies to Korban Pesach. I'm slaughtering it on Erev Pesach. I can also eat it on Erev Pesach in the afternoon, as well as that night. So Tamalom Balayla, says Rabbi Kiva, that's why it says Balayla. Balayla unecho benunecho bayom. That the Korban Pesach is dafke eaten at night, it is not eaten in the afternoon when it's slaughtered. Rabbi Kiva hayazeh ma'avadei. Okay, fine, so you answer for halayla. What do you do with hazeh? Again, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, halayla hazeh is there for a gzeir shava. According to Rabbi Kiva, so he learns out from halayla, don't eat it in the afternoon, only eat it at night. What does he learn out from hazeh? So mibayle limute laila acher uda asa. So the Gemara says that according to Rabbi Kiva, balayla hazeh means, yes, you eat it on this night to the exclusion of another night. Because I may have had the Havmina to say, well, since the Korban Pesach is a Kodshim Kalim, right? You can eat it anywhere in Jerusalem. And also a Shlomim, for example, is a Kodshim Kalim. Well, I might argue that, well, when it comes to Shlomim, you can eat it for 2 nights, 2 days, and the night in between. Right? The day that it's slaughtered, the following day, and also the night in between them. So at Pesach, so I might make the argument to say that by Korban Pesach, ukim leilos b'mkom yomim, I'll swap out the days for nights, right? So kilu, while by a shlamim you can eat it for 2 days and the night in between, I'll swap it out and reverse it for a Korban Pesach and say that even though we said that it says balayla, therefore you wouldn't be able to eat it on the afternoon that you slaughtered it, but you can eat it that night, and I'll say you can also eat it the next night. It's a machlokus between Rashi and Rashbam whether you'd be able to eat it the night in between. Let's just assume for now, like Rashi and Masechta Brachas, that you would not eat it I said the night in between, I meant the day in between. Right? Kilu. Rabbi Kiva is saying that just like by Shlamim, you would eat it for 2 days and the night in between, so make the argument that by Korban Pesach, you can eat it for 2 nights and the day in between. So, according to Rashi though, because the Pasuk says Balayla, so you only eat the Korban Pesach at night, so it doesn't actually mean that you'd be able to eat it the day in between, but the point is that you'd be able to eat it for 2 nights. Okay, so Seder night, and I might have the Havmina to say that you can also eat it the next night as well, even though you wouldn't eat it during the day in between, since it says Balayla, but the point is that I might have the Havmina to say that it would not necessarily be possible by the following morning. So Kamash Malan, Balayla Hazeh. No, you only dafka eat it this night. It says Balayla to the exclusion of the afternoon. You don't eat it on the afternoon of the 14th, only at night, and also specifically this night, you cannot also eat it the following night. So I might have the Havmina to say that you can eat the Korban Pesach for 2 nights and the day in between, but again, according to Rashi, you wouldn't actually be able to eat it during that day. Just the point is that it wouldn't be possible during that day. Therefore the puzzle says this night specifically, that night is when you can eat it. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would say Milos Osiru ad boker nafka, that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would say, no, I know that it's specifically this night because it says don't leave it over to the morning. So obviously, don't leave it over to the morning. You're only going to be eating it one night. Rabbi Kiva would argue, if it wouldn't say Balayla Hazeh, Havamina, I would think to say, my boker, yeah, what does it mean that don't leave it over to the boker? Boker Sheni, don't leave it over to the second morning. But I might think that I can eat it for 2 nights. So Kamash Malan, according to Rabbi Kiva, Balayla Hazeh, no, it's specifically the first night. Rabbi Elazar Amalach Kol Echad Dekasav Boker Boker Rishonu. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I wouldn't think that Los Asum at Boker might mean the second morning. No way. Who's ever heard of that? When it says Boker, it means the next morning. That's that. I don't need the pasuk to teach me Balayla Hazeh to say it means specifically this night, to the exclusion of the next night or the second morning, right? Rava says Rava Achomatzav Bizman Hazeh Acher Chatzos Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Lo Yotzi Dei Chovaso. Okay, so says Rava that when we eat our matzah on Seder night at the end, our afikoman, so it's basically the equivalent of the Korban Pesach. And just like the Korban Pesach, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would say that after Chatzos, it becomes no, so you're not allowed to eat it anymore. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would say that Bizman Hazeh nowadays, if you eat the afikoman, the matzah after chatzos, right? The matzah after chatzos becomes pasul, right? What does he say? Rava says, Rava, if you eat the matzah, if you eat the afikoman after chatzos, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, lo yotzi de chovaso. You're not going to be yotzi your obligation, because just like the korban pesach, it becomes noser after chatzos. Also, the matzah which we eat to commemorate the matzah that was eaten with the korban pesach at the end of the suda, if you eat it after chatzos, you're not yotze. Pshita, that's obvious. They came to iskish the pesach domi. Well, since the matzah is compared to the korban pesach, right? It says a matzah smrom yochlu. So I might think, right? So certainly, if the korban pesach after chatzos you can't eat it, so then after the matzah also after chatzos you can't eat it. Well, mahadetema apke rachmana apke kra me'ekesha. I may have thought to say that yes, but we had that we had that limud when it came to the seventh day, right? It says v'yom hashvi atzeres Hashem Elokecha, and we say that from atzeres, right? V'yom hashvi atzeres Hashem Elokecha, it's rishus, and therefore we want to say that the whole holiday was rishus, and therefore once we all of a sudden we have that limud to say that not the whole, meaning all 7 days is rishus. Therefore, I might think that eating the matzah bisman hazeh is also rishus, and therefore we kind of lose that connection between matzah and korban pesach, right? Initially it had said that al matzah smor yochlu, you eat the korban pesach with matzah and maror. So therefore, okay, so we have the comparison between matzah and korban pesach, and therefore just like korban pesach you only eat till chatzos, so the matzah also only eat till chatzos. But then we had that pasuk which says, right, bayom hashvi atzeres Hashem Elokecha, which we learn out. Well, just like the seventh day is optional, also the first 6 days are also optional. And therefore, well, if that's the case, then we're no longer comparing korban pesach and matzah. So kamash malon, that when the pasuk of be'erev tochlu matzahs comes to say that no, that the first night of Pesach matzah is the oraisa, it reinstates the comparison to korban pesach, and therefore just like korban pesach, if you eat it after chatzos, you are not yotze. Also the matzah of the afikoman bisman hazeh, if you eat it after chatzos, you are not going to be yotze. And that is what Rava is coming to teach us, that according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, if you eat the afikoman nowadays after chatzos, you're not yotze. As I mentioned, when we learned Masechta Brachos, there is the interesting Tanai of the Avnei Nezer, which is, if you see that you're running a little bit late on Seder night, so what you do is, a little bit before chatzos, you eat some matzah from the afikoman, I think, or what is it, or you just like stop eating, or maybe eat a shtickle matzah before chatzos, and then you make a tanai. You say, well, if it's like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, well, I'm now eating a shtickle matzah, and then basically you don't eat anything until chatzos. Comes chatzos already, so then the matzah was the last thing that you ate by chatzos. And then after that, I guess you could, the Eim Aftir Nachar Pesach afikoman, I guess, doesn't apply anymore, because the korban pesach is like over at that point, I guess. Then you can continue your seder, and then you eat the afikoman later, and it's like, well, if the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, that I can eat my korban pesach until Amud HaShachar, well then I'm just gonna, whenever I get to my korban pesach, I get to my korban pesach, or kilu my afikoman, I get to my afikoman. That's what they say. I don't know. Apparently there's kashas on it. I don't know. Oh, great. So that was daf Kufchaf of Masechta Pesachim, daf 120 of Masechta Pesachim. So we discussed the inyan of in maftir nachar matzah afikoman, right? That just like when they had the korban pesach, so you wouldn't eat anything after the korban pesach. So also nowadays we don't have a korban pesach, but we eat matzah as the afikoman. So also don't eat anything after your matzah afikoman. Matzah and maror bisman hazeh. We have the machlokas between Rava and Ravacha bar Yaakov. Everyone agrees that maror bisman hazeh is midrabanan. However, Rava says that matzah bisman hazeh is midoraisa. Ravacha bar Yaakov says no, matzah bisman hazeh is midrabanan. We had a Mishnah which says that if you have a chabura that falls asleep while they're eating their matzah korban pesach, while they're eating their afikoman, so if everybody falls asleep, so then you can't continue eating your afikoman. If part of the group falls asleep, well then when they wake up they can continue eating their afikoman. Now, as Rabbi Yossi says that's only if they kind of dozed off, but if they mamish fell asleep, they wouldn't be able to continue eating their afikoman because it would be like hesach hadas. And then we saw the famous machlokus between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah regarding the final time to eat the korban pesach. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says you can eat the korban pesach until chatzos. Rabbi Akiva says you can eat the korban pesach until the morning. That is the machlokas. Chevra, have a great day. Peace out.